We're here to recap the NBA trade deadline and why the Dallas Mavericks are still title contenders.
Welcome back to Life in the Stands podcast. We have Jake and Zach on the podcast today. We're excited to grade some of the biggest trades from the past NBA deadline. Let's jump right into probably the biggest trade. It happened a little bit before the deadline. The Lakers and the Mavericks swapped superstars, Anthony Davis and Luka Doncic. Full trade is up on the screen.
So I think we start with the Dallas Mavericks. Anthony Davis is a pretty solid addition for that team, and I believe it kind of is a perfect fit. And I know people are like, why would you trade Luka? Draymond, I think, brought it up perfectly with teams wanting to avoid the second apron in that new agreement, which you don't have to pay him the supermax anymore. And then you're bringing in a guy that can still bring you a championship. It was already a Kyrie-led team with Luka out for so long. He was out since Christmas Day. They were still winning games, at least hovering around 500 without your second superstar, which is cool, without Derek Lively. I think Gafford's going to miss some time now, too. Whenever Anthony Davis does come back, which will be in time for playoffs, assuming health, of course, you saw what he did in his debut, and that was only through 3 quarters. They fit perfectly on day one. I'm not saying that's how people expected it to go right away anyway, but I do like it from their perspective, and Anthony Davis gets to play next to a center like Gafford and Lively like he asked for in LA. So I think it's a win-win. And going to the other win of that scenario, it's the Lakers. Now, Luka is what he is. Everybody knows Luka Magic, blah, blah, blah. He's probably like the next LeBron-type guy to come through. He's going to be with that team for a long time, especially after LeBron goes. It is his team. It's not LeBron's team. And that's why I have it as an A move. It might not be a championship contender this year, although they look pretty good right now. I don't think they'll be a contender this year, but this team is built around Luka, plus just having LeBron is okay. Like, he can be the Swiss Army knife and just kind of be there at this point with Luka on the team. I just like it from the future perspective with the Lakers, and with the Mavericks, I like it from their present perspective.
Yeah, definitely a win-win for both teams. Obviously, the A grade for both of them. I think the things that I would highlight in each scenario is AD getting to play the 4. So he does not have to play the center position, which I think is a really big deal. And then Luka, I think there was always kind of a conversation with the Lakers, LeBron and AD, where like maybe it's the first time in LeBron's career that he's kind of second fiddle to Anthony Davis, and Anthony Davis is like the guy. Bring Luka in, now there's no question. Like, Luka is the guy on the Lakers roster, and it's the first time in LeBron's career that he's ever kind of been second fiddle. But obviously he's okay with it because you've seen what he's done since Luka's been traded. He's having fun with it. So let's jump into the next trade here. We got the Spurs and the Kings. This was a big swap. So the Spurs traded for De'Aaron Fox, which was a big move, obviously. What do you think of those trades, pairing up De'Aaron Fox and Wemby?
So I think this is one of the best trades of the deadline, and I think it might be the best trade of the deadline overall. Not by the way I graded them, and there's a reasoning for that, and you'll see later which has the better grade. I have it as an A plus for the Spurs because that pairs a young superstar up with Wemby without having to go through the draft. Now, talking about the draft, their rookie Stephon Castle is playing very well off the bench, and the key parts here are De'Aaron Fox and Stephon Castle because CP3 is going to be a good mentor for those two guys before he hits free agency again this year. Right. I don't think they'll bring him back, but I do think his leadership will help those guys develop. And I do want to jump to the Kings. That's got to be the worst the franchise, I think, in the NBA outside of the Hornets. That's just my opinion. They don't seem to pair up the right guys, or they wait too long to try and pair up the right guys with each other. They did nothing to help out Boogie when he was there. They tried to keep De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis together, but they didn't really add anything around it besides DeMar DeRozan this year. But you knew if it wasn't going to work, like, you were going to move on from somebody anyway. They had that spurt where they had to fire Mike Brown, so you kind of already knew it was falling apart. Zach LaVine's not a good fit for that team. They needed something else, and I don't know what that would have been. But Zach LaVine and DeRozan played with each other in Chicago. They did nothing over there, so why would you think they would do something in Sacramento? What makes that team any different? Vucevic and Sabonis are similar type players. Sabonis is a little bit better, but similar type players. If you want to compare those two teams, you're not getting anything extra from what that Bulls team already was, is kind of my opinion. And they have no point guard. They have no point guard.
Yeah, I don't understand the trade either, really, from the Kings' perspective. It almost makes me wonder, like, was there not a better trade partner out there for De'Aaron Fox? Like, is there nowhere else you could have sent him that maybe would have just done something a little different, even if it was just a boatload of future picks, but just, I mean, something different. Because if anything, then you send them on a rebuilding path, which might be what they need too. But let's jump into the next trade again here. You got the Warriors and the Heat. The Heat picking up Andrew Wiggins, which is the big headline in this trade, obviously. And then Jimmy Butler, by the way, also went to the Warriors. So you got some interesting grades on this one. Pretty close, though, both Bs. Explain why the Warriors get a better grade than the Heat do.
I think it's because you get another superstar to try and win now, with Steph Curry and Draymond on an expiring timeline, I want to call it. And Draymond also said this on his podcast about Steph Curry realized after that trade, like, this could be the last ride.
Yeah.
And Jimmy
Yeah.
signed a 2-year extension, which means they have 2 years to try and win another. So that's basically where you're at. I give them a B plus more just because they acquired a superstar, but I'm still saying B minus for the Heat because I think they could have gotten better from Jimmy. However, Wiggins is still a pretty solid fit for that team.
I think Wiggins is a solid fit, and I also think the Heat were in a tough spot because everyone knows they have to trade Jimmy, right? So I think there's kind of that give and pull between like, yeah, Jimmy's really valuable, but not for you because he doesn't want to be there. He's going to force his way out anyway. So it's like the leverage in those conversations would just be really interesting to hear from those GMs. But let's jump into the next trade again. Raptors and Pelicans. So Brandon Ingram gets sent to the Raptors and then immediately signs an extension there as well. Walk me through your thoughts about this one.
So I like it for the Raptors, obviously, if you look at the grades here. The Raptors have 3 pieces now. They got RJ Barrett last year. They drafted Scotty Barnes a year prior, I believe. And now they have Brandon Ingram. Scotty Barnes can defend a 4, which helps them out a lot. It's a very wing-driven league right now, especially if you're trying to compete with the Celtics in the same conference. You definitely need some wings. And I just like that moving forward because I don't like teams because the Raptors, like, they're making small moves. They finally made some big moves that I think can kind of transition them to probably like a top 6 team in the East, and still compete for next year. I'm talking about next year. They're not going to do anything this year, but I like where they're starting at, and you still have the draft to go through. Now, if you're the Pelicans, I don't like any of it. Now, the leverage was kind of not in their favor as well. It's kind of like a Jimmy Butler situation, so you kind of
Yeah.
have to take what you get. Ingram already gave them the memo last year that he wasn't signing an extension. They didn't get something worked out this year, and it was just kind of like, all right, let's get anything for Brandon Ingram at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about some of the worst run franchises and you throw out the Kings, you throw out the Hornets. I feel like the Pelicans might be up there with you just like see the way they've managed talent. I mean, they had Boogie Cousins and Anthony Davis together at one point too. What's happened with Zion? I mean, you have a core there of CJ McCollum, Zion, and Brandon Ingram. When that got placed together at first, I mean, there was a lot of expectations there. You
But
have to wonder what's going on behind closed doors.
I would like to stop you though because I think the Pelicans have gotten unlucky with health. Let's go back to DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis. Neither one of them could stay healthy. DeMarcus Cousins long-term injury, Rondo got hurt here and there. That team with Rondo, Drew Holiday, AD, and Boogie was winning games and they were dangerous. But
Right,
their health made them like an 8 seed or something the one year and then they fell apart. Boogie got hurt and they were like, "All right, let's just trade Anthony Davis for something at this point."
right.
That helped the Lakers rebuild, obviously. And now this time around, it's Zion always hurt. DeJounte Murray hurt twice in a year. CJ's missed time. Brandon Ingram's missed time. I don't think any of those guys have played a full game together this year.
What's the medical staff doing, man?
Is it the medical staff? Is it their practice habits? Is there, there's a
Yeah,
lot that
what's
goes
going
into
on?
it.
What's going on? All right, let's move on though. We got 2 more trades that we're going to talk about today. We're going to jump into the Bucks and Wizards. Quite the trade grades here for these. You are not a fan of the Wizards and what they've acquired for Kyle Kuzma.
Yeah, let's put it this way. Chris Middleton cannot stay healthy. The Bucks want to move on from him since last year as well. And I thought they were going to get a bag of chips for him, and they ended up getting Kuzma, which is why I think it's a B plus grade for the Bucks to get anybody at that spot. And Kuzma, I think, is a great fit for that team because he doesn't have to be the number 1 or number 2 guy like he was with the Wizards or like he was with a young Lakers team. Like I felt like his expectations were too high. And he's not that guy. Like he's a great player, but he's not that guy. And I think taking a backseat to two alphas and 1A and 1B, Giannis and Dame is a great spot for him. Now the Wizards, you get the dude that doesn't play. So it's just a terrible trade all around, and it's an older guy who doesn't fit your timeline with anybody on that team.
Yeah, you're just picking up a contract to make it work. So very, very interesting indeed. Kuzma's situation almost reminds me a little bit of Andrew Wiggins on the Warriors when they made their title run.
A
Even
little
though he
bit.
ended up being a really key piece there, maybe even the second best player at the time. But you still had, that star-studded core, right? And then he came in, got to just not be the focus.
I'll say keyword, you said key piece, not superstar, right?
Yeah, yeah, key piece for sure. All right, the last trade of the day, kind of saved the best for last because you had the highest grade out of any trade on this one for the Cavaliers picking up DeAndre Hunter. I cut off a few of the plus marks. Bender had more of them on there, but why are you such a fan of the Cavs picking up DeAndre Hunter?
So I think I explained this to you and to everybody that was on our TikTok live as well when the trade deadline was happening. So DeAndre Hunter being acquired by the Cavs is a big move for the Cavs because it's not the biggest market and the first place you look at for like a free agency standpoint. So a lot of things that they have to do is through the draft or through trades. So that was the next big thing that they could do because it also gives them a wing defender to try and compete with the Celtics, who have beat them several times already this year. So to have another wing piece that helps them out, and then they're already number 2 seed in the East. So
Yeah,
it's kind of just like the leg up to try and compete with the Celtics because between the 1 seed Celtics, the Cavs are all the way down here. Like it's not close. I think they closed that gap just a little bit.
yeah.
From the Hawks' perspective, I think it was more just they got more bench depth to add to that team going into next year. You're still not looking at it this year's perspective. They got Man from the Clippers as well, so they
Right.
were a selling team. They're trying to give it another run with Trae Young and see what happens. It's not a bad start, but obviously still not good for that team.
Yeah, the Hawks, hopefully they get it right this time of training. I feel like there's been like two or three entirely different iterations now of trying to build a team around Trae Young. We'll see how that goes. I mean, Trae Young has been successful though at certain points. He's reached second and third rounds of the playoffs. So we'll see how that continues to go. I was not a fan of the DeAndre Hunter pickup originally, just because I didn't look at it from the perspective that you shared of basically just matching up with the Celtics. So I think from that perspective, it's a good trade. I am concerned that it's still not enough to really match up with what Boston has. And on top of that concern, I think that if they don't make it past the second round this year or beat that Celtics team potentially, you might see Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell out the door. You might see that team start to get broken up because it's been talked about for the last couple of years now and it hasn't happened. But I think you make a move like this at the trade deadline, they're all in a little bit this year.
It just to get kind of what second round bounce is what it would be. Miss the Eastern Conference Finals. That's what would happen in that scenario. Because the
Yeah.
Celtics would be a 1 seed. They would have to, first of all, they would have to, go through. No, it would be in the Eastern Conference Finals because the Cavs would have to beat the Knicks and then beat whoever else and then go there. So they still have a pretty tough path because nobody's talking about the Knicks anymore either. So if you even get second round bounce to the Knicks when you're trying to match up with the Celtics, that doesn't look good. I do see where the rebuild could come in, but I don't think they would rebuild just because of how well they performed this year with a new coach as well. But no, I like it a lot. I think the fit matches, but I don't know what other move they could have made either. So I like it a lot.
They should have traded for Jalen Brown or Jason Tatum. It would have had them match up for the Celtics better. But this has been another episode of Life in the Sands podcast. We got Jake and Zach. I want to thank everyone for watching and listening. Remember to like and subscribe. Let us know down in the comments what grades you would give for each trade we talked about, and we'll see you on the next episode.